Welcome to science class. Today we are going to focus solely on the characteristics and actions of rivers. Take a look at and appreciate the Colorado River in this picture. Despite barely even having a ripple on its surface, which is a clue that it's not moving very fast, this river has somehow cut into solid rock hundreds of feet down. All of what used to be there is now in the ocean. But this is a small piece of the picture. The Colorado River is over 2,300 kilometers long. If you add up all of the rivers on Earth that are at least 1,000 kilometers long, this gives us a length of over 343,000 kilometers. That's 8.5 times the circumference of our planet. All of these rivers have a river channel, a section of the Earth they have eroded away, and many of them are part of valleys and canyons that they eroded too. Rivers and flowing water transform the planet more rapidly and on the biggest scale by far. Let's get started. Rivers exist because of the water cycle, plate tectonics, and the sun. The sun's heat evaporates water, and it later condenses and falls as rain or snow. That's the water cycle. Plate tectonics takes sections of Earth's surface and thrusts them upward towards the sky. This is what gives water potential energy. The water finds its way down to sea level where it has zero potential energy, and that's what rivers are. A river takes a winding and random path as it searches for the lowest energy, but it is a constant downward slope, an extremely gradual slope. We call this slope the river's gradient, and it's an important characteristic. The Nile River, the longest river in the world, has an average gradient of just barely under 1/100th of a degree. That's pretty weak. Let's compare that to the Colorado River. Its average gradient is about 8 times greater than the Nile. Why does this matter? Because the steeper the gradient, the faster the water flows, and the quicker it weathers and erodes sediment. This is precisely why the Colorado has been able to cut and saw its way through the American Southwest, forming Glenwood Canyon, the Grand Canyon, and more. The Nile River, by contrast, doesn't form any canyons. It just doesn't have enough potential energy. The Colorado River begins high in the Rocky Mountains, 3,100 meters above sea level, while the Nile's source is Lake Victoria, which is only 1,100 meters above sea level. The Nile is also nearly 3 times the length of the Colorado, so even if it did begin at the same elevation, it still would have less potential energy. Maybe you caught it there, but the source is the word we use for the origin of a river. For some rivers, the source is obvious, like Lake Victoria, which is gigantic. Other rivers, though, don't have a specific source. Mountains are the source for many rivers, but many tiny mountain streams gradually come together to form the main river. Gravity and topography dictate the path a river takes. Perhaps you've heard of a Continental Divide. That's the border where water on one side of the divide flows in one direction, and then on the other side it flows somewhere else. At the Continental Divide in Colorado, nearly all of the flowing water on the east side eventually flows out of the Gulf of Mexico through the Mississippi Delta, whereas all of the flowing water on the west side eventually flows out of the Gulf of California into the Pacific Ocean. The topography also dictates the velocity and energy the river carries. We covered this earlier when we discussed the differences between the Colorado and the Nile River. Another important characteristic of a river is its discharge. Discharge is a measure of the volume of water flowing past a certain point in a given time. It's usually expressed as cubic meters per second. This is how big a cubic meter is. Rivers don't have a definite discharge. For one, discharge increases as you get closer to sea level, because rivers have tributaries, which we will cover in a bit. Discharge also changes during the year. Most rivers have more water in them during the spring from rapid snowmelt or seasonal rains. The river with the greatest discharge is the Amazon River. The discharge of the Amazon is 212,400 cubic meters per second. The next 9 rivers on the top 10 list combined only have a discharge of 182,000 cubic meters per second. In fact, in terms of total volume of water, the Amazon contains more water than Lake Michigan and Lake Erie combined, which is pretty mind-blowing. The Nile, again, is the longest river in the world, just less than twice the length of the Mississippi. But there are 90 rivers in the world with greater discharges. How can that be? This is because the Nile barely has any tributaries. A tributary is a river that empties into another river rather than the sea. The Nile really has two, the White River and the Blue River. Compare the Mississippi tributary system. Every single river, and there are a lot of them, inside of this colored area feeds into the Mississippi, adding to its discharge. Some rivers don't empty into the ocean or another river. Some rivers empty into lakes, such as the Kagera River, which empties into Lake Victoria. In any case, where a river ends is where its gradient also comes to an end. We call this base level. No river can erode into the earth deeper than its base level, because rivers can't flow uphill. When rivers are high above their base level, they cut more direct pathways, while when a river is close to its base level, they weave back and forth, creating what are called meanders. River gradient is like a Hot Wheels track. It starts off steep, but the majority of its overall length is fairly level ground. Rivers weather and erode through abrasion, lifting, and dissolving. Abrasion is like what the wind does. Flowing water carries sediments, which can very slowly chip away at other surfaces. That's technically weathering. Lifting is where the velocity of the river picks up sediment and carries them, which is erosion. Finally, dissolving is where the mild acidity of the water dissolves weak minerals away. This again is weathering. The eroded sediments are carried in rivers in three different forms. First, there is the dissolved load. This is the material in a river that is in solution. These particles cannot settle to the bottom of the river. Most of the dissolved load is fed into a river through groundwater. Rivers also erode down to where the groundwater sits. We call that boundary the water table. Rivers require groundwater to keep them fed with water. It's not just the rain and snowmelt and tributaries. The water that comes from the ground carries dissolved minerals with it. A small amount of the dissolved load is also produced from rocks that are in the river all along its channel. Most of the sediment that a river carries is called the suspended load. These are sediments that are visible and they are carried by the river's velocity. Then there's the bed load. This is the material that is shuffled along the river bottom. It's not in constant motion, but it is slowly transported. The amount and type of sediment that a river can carry depends on a combination of the river's gradient, velocity, width, and volume. Competence describes how large the sediments that a river can carry in suspension are. Competence gradually decreases along a river's channel because the gradient, and therefore velocity, gradually decreases as well. Capacity, meanwhile, describes the maximum amount of sediment that a stream can carry. Capacity gradually increases along a river's channel because capacity depends on discharge. When the river ends, it has no velocity, so all the sediment in suspension drops. This creates the river's delta. Because rivers keep flowing, deltas never stop growing. Gradually, new land where plants can grow and people can permanently settle is produced. The largest delta in the world is in India, where the Ganges and Brahmaputra rivers converge, and it is something like 340 kilometers across. It's also the site of the world's largest mangrove forest. Next time, we are going to take a look at how ice and glaciers erode. Thanks for watching.